Hello and welcome. Sit down and relax. Take a deep breath. Let the noise of the day gently fade away as we journey together through time, not to a place of battles or empires in turmoil, but to a sanctuary of peace, knowledge, and quiet wonder. Tonight, we travel to the shores of the Mediterranean, to the golden age of ancient Alexandria, and into the heart of one of humanity's most cherished dreams, the Great Library. As the soft waves lap against the harbor and the scent of papyrus and olive oil lingers in the warm air, imagine walking beneath colonnaded porticos, past scholars in quiet conversation, their voices low, their minds alight with curiosity. This is not a story of conquest, but of connection, not of fire and fury, but of ink and insight. So settle in, let your shoulders soften, and allow yourself to drift into the calm, luminous world of the Library of Alexandria. Our story begins not with a single person, but with a vision, a dream born in the mind of a king who sought not glory through war, but legacy through learning. That king was Ptolemy I Soter, a general of Alexander the Great. When Alexander died in 323 BCE, his vast empire was divided among his closest companions. Ptolemy chose Egypt, a land rich in grain, gold, and ancient wisdom. And in the delta of the Nile, on a slender strip of land between sea and lagoon, he founded a city that would become a beacon of the ancient world, Alexandria. But Ptolemy did not wish to rule by force alone. He understood that true power lay not only in armies but in ideas. So he and his son, Ptolemy II Philadelphus, set out to build something unprecedented, a place where all the knowledge of the known world could be gathered, preserved, and studied. Thus, in the early 3rd century BCE, the Library of Alexandria was born. It was not merely a building filled with scrolls. It was a living institution, a university, a research center, a museum, and a sanctuary for the mind. Attached to the royal palace complex, the library was part of a larger scholarly precinct known as the Mausoleum, or Temple of the Muses. Here, scholars from Greece, Persia, India, and beyond were welcomed, fed, and given salaries by the state, so they could devote their lives to study, free from want. Imagine the quiet hum of intellectual life within its halls. In one room, a mathematician traces geometric proofs in the dust on a marble floor. In another, a poet recites verses from Homer, his voice echoing softly against limestone walls. Nearby, a botanist compares plant specimens from the Nile Valley and the Indus River, while an astronomer charts the stars from a rooftop observatory. There is no rush, no clamor, only the gentle turning of scrolls, the scratch of reed pens, and the shared joy of discovery. At its height, the library is said to have held between 40,000 and 700,000 scrolls, though the exact number remains uncertain. Each scroll was a labor of love, copied by hand on papyrus, carefully labeled and stored in wooden or clay cases. The librarians, among the most respected intellectuals of their time, developed systems for cataloging and organizing this vast collection. The first known library catalog, called the Pinax, was compiled by Callimachus of Cyrene, a scholar who never held the title of head librarian, but whose work became the foundation of bibliographic science. Among the luminaries who walked these halls was Euclid, the father of geometry, whose elements would shape mathematical thought for over 2 millennia. There was also Eratosthenes, the chief librarian who calculated the circumference of the earth with astonishing accuracy, using only shadows, sticks, and logic. He measured the distance between two cities, Syene and Alexandria, and observed the angle of the sun at noon on the summer solstice. From that simple observation, he deduced that our planet was round, and how large it truly was. Then there was Herophilus, who, in a rare and remarkable departure from ancient taboo, performed human dissections to study anatomy. His work laid the groundwork for modern medicine, identifying the brain as the center of the nervous system and distinguishing between veins and arteries. All of this, mathematics, geography, medicine, poetry, astronomy, flourished under the library's quiet roof. But how did they gather so much knowledge? The Ptolemies were relentless in their pursuit. Ships arriving in Alexandria's great harbor were searched for books. If a scroll was found, it was borrowed, copied by scribes, and the copy, often of higher quality than the original, was returned to the owner while the library kept the original. Some accounts even say that any book found on a ship was seized and added to the collection. Whether true or embellished, the message is clear. Knowledge was considered so precious that no effort was too great to preserve it. For centuries, the library stood as a symbol of what humanity could achieve when curiosity was honored and protected. It was not perfect. Scholars debated fiercely, rivalries formed, and politics sometimes intruded. But its core mission remained: to collect, understand, and share the wisdom of the world. Now let us speak gently of its end. Contrary to popular belief, the library was not destroyed in a single fiery night. Its decline was slow, quiet, and tragic, a fading rather than a fall. Over the centuries, it suffered damage during civil unrest, such as the riots during Julius Caesar's campaign in Egypt in 48 BCE, when part of the city, possibly including a warehouse of scrolls, may have burned. Later, in the 3rd century CE, the Roman Emperor Aurelian's siege of Alexandria caused further destruction. And by the 4th century, as the Roman Empire turned toward Christianity, pagan institutions like the Mausoleum lost favor and funding. The final blow may have come in the late 4th or early 5th century, when Christian authorities, seeking to erase symbols of the old order, closed or dismantled remaining centers of pagan learning. The philosopher Hypatia, a brilliant mathematician and teacher in Alexandria, was tragically murdered in 415 CE, a symbol of the end of an era. With her death, the last echoes of the library's spirit seemed to vanish into silence. Yet its legacy never truly died. Many of its texts had already been copied and carried to other centers of learning: Byzantium, Baghdad, and eventually medieval Europe. The works of Euclid, Archimedes, and Ptolemy survived, often thanks to Arabic scholars who translated and preserved them during Europe's so-called Dark Ages. In this way, the library lived on, not in stone and papyrus, but in the minds of those who continued to seek truth. Today, near the original site, a new Library of Alexandria stands, a modern tribute to that ancient dream. Its walls curve like a rising sun, its shelves hold millions of books, and its reading rooms welcome students from every corner of the globe. It is a reminder that the desire to know, to understand, and to share is as old as humanity itself, and as enduring. As we come to the close of our journey, let us rest for a moment in the quiet that once filled those hallowed halls. Picture the soft light filtering through high windows, the rustle of a scroll being unrolled, the distant call of a gull over the sea. There is peace in this memory, not because the world was perfect, but because, for a time, people chose to build something beautiful together. Knowledge is fragile. It can be lost to fire, time, or indifference. But it can also be reborn in a new generation, in a quiet reader in you listening now. So carry this calm with you. Let it remind you that even in noisy times, there is always room for reflection, for learning, for wonder. Thank you for walking with me through the corridors of history. May your dreams be as peaceful as the scholar's studies in Alexandria, and may your mind always find rest in the beauty of what has been and what can be again. Would you like me to continue with more details, perhaps deeper stories of individual scholars, daily life in the Mausoleum, or the journey of specific texts through time? Let me know, and I'll be glad to extend this narration further. In our last moments together, we walked through the founding of this sacred space of learning, met its visionary kings, and glimpsed the great minds who shaped human understanding from within its walls. Now, let us step closer. Let us imagine not just the grand ideas, but the quiet daily life that made them possible. For every great discovery began with a simple act: a scholar rising at dawn, lighting an oil lamp and reaching for a scroll. Picture this. It is early morning in the 3rd century BCE. The sun has just risen over the eastern hills, painting the sky in pale gold and rose. The city of Alexandria stirs slowly, Fishermen haul in their nets, merchants unroll their awnings, and temple priests chant their morning hymns. But in the royal quarter, near the palace and the sea, a different kind of day begins. Inside the Mauseon, the temple of the Muses, scholars are already awake. They do not rush. There is no bell to ring, no clock to obey. Time here is measured in breaths, in lines of poetry, and the slow drying of ink. Each scholar has a small room or shared chamber with a wooden desk, a low stool, and shelves lined with clay jars holding scrolls. The air smells of beeswax, cedarwood, and the faint tang of ink made from soot and gum. Breakfast is simple: bread dipped in olive oil, figs, and a cup of watered wine. Meals are taken in a common dining hall, where conversation is encouraged, but always in hushed tones. The Ptolemies believed that the mind thrived not in isolation, but in gentle exchange. So over breakfast, a young astronomer might ask an older geographer about the shape of the Red Sea. A poet might recite a new verse, and a philosopher might offer a quiet word of praise or suggestion. There is no shouting, no debate for the sake of winning, only the shared pursuit of clarity. After breakfast, the day's work begins. In the main reading hall of the library, sunlight filters through high windows, casting long rectangles of light across polished stone floors. Scrolls are brought out by attendants, carefully labeled, stored in numbered cases, and tracked in the great catalog, the Pinax. If a scholar needs a text from another city, say, a rare play by Sophocles or a Babylonian star chart, the library's network of agents may have already secured a copy. If not, a request is sent to sister institutions in Pergamum, Athens, or Rhodes. Scribes sit at long tables, their hands moving steadily as they copy texts. They use reed pens and black ink for the main text, red ink for headings or corrections. Every stroke is deliberate. A single scroll might take days to complete. Mistakes are not erased. They are carefully noted with small marks and corrections added in the margins. Accuracy is sacred. For to copy a text is not merely to reproduce words, it is to carry a soul across time. Nearby, a group of students gathers around Eratosthenes, the chief librarian. He is not a stern man, but kind-eyed with a dry sense of humor. Today he teaches them how to measure shadows. He places a vertical rod, a gnomon, in the courtyard and marks the length of its shadow at noon. The sun, he says softly, does not strike all places equally. In scene far to the south, the sun at midday on the solstice shines straight down a well, no shadow at all. But here in Alexandria the shadow remains. That difference, that is the curve of the earth. The students lean in, sketching diagrams in wax tablets. No one interrupts. No one boasts. They listen, they wonder, they try. And in that quiet courtyard under the Mediterranean sun, the planet reveals one of its oldest secrets, not through thunder or miracle, but through patience and observation. Meanwhile, in a shaded garden behind the library, a botanist named Theophrastus, student of Aristotle, compares leaves from Egypt, Persia, and Sicily. He presses them between sheets of linen, labels them with their native names, and notes their uses. This one for fever, that one for calming the nerves. His work will become the foundation of botanical science, and his writings will survive for over 2,000 years. Time passes like water. The sun climbs, then begins its slow descent. At midday there is a pause, a moment to rest in the colonnade, to sip cool water, to watch the ships come and go in the great harbor. Some scholars nap. Others walk along the sea wall, letting the breeze clear their minds. There is no shame in rest here. The library honors not only intellect but balance. In the afternoon, lectures resume. A poet reads from the newly edited version of Homer's Iliad, standardized by scholars to preserve the most authentic lines. A mathematician demonstrates how to construct a perfect hexagon using only a compass and straightedge. A young woman from Cyrene, rare but not unheard of, presents her findings on lunar eclipses, her voice steady, her calculations precise. For though the ancient world was often closed to women in public life, the library was in many ways an exception. Under the Ptolemies, learning was valued above gender. Queens like Berenice II were patrons of the arts and even poets themselves. And while few women held official posts, Those with means and talent could study, write, and contribute. Their names may not all survive, but their presence lingers in the margins of history, like faint ink on aged papyrus. As evening falls, oil lamps are lit. The scent of burning olive oil mingles with sea air. Scholars gather once more, not to work but to reflect. They share stories, recite verses, or simply sit in companionable silence. The stars appear, one by one, and from the rooftop observatory, an astronomer begins his night's watch, charting the slow dance of constellations. This is the rhythm of the library. Not grand spectacle, but steady devotion. Not fame, but fidelity, to truth, to craft, to the quiet joy of knowing. And though the library would one day fade, this rhythm never truly ended. It lives on in every library today, in every student who stays up late reading, in every person who chooses curiosity over noise. So as we pause here beneath the stars of ancient Alexandria, let yourself rest in this truth. You, too, are part of this lineage. Every time you seek to understand, to learn, to wonder, you walk those marble halls. Imagine a quiet afternoon in the library around 240 BCE. A scribe named Demetrius dips his reed pen into a pot of black ink. Before him lies a worn copy of a treatise by the heavens. It is not a famous work like the Iliad or the Republic, but a careful study of the cosmos, filled with observations about the stars, the shape of the earth, and the nature of motion. Demetrius does not know it yet, but the copy he is making today will outlive empires. He works slowly, his hand steady. Each letter is formed with care. When he finishes, the scroll is dried, labeled, and placed in a cedar case marked with a small tag. Aristotle Decalo, copy 17. It joins thousands of others in the great stacks, some in Greek, some translated from Persian, Hebrew, or Sanskrit. This scroll will be read by students, cited by astronomers, and eventually, centuries later, packed into a chest during a time of unrest. Fast forward to the 1st century BCE. Alexandria is no longer ruled by the Ptolemies but by Rome. The library still stands, though diminished. Scholars come less frequently now. Yet in a small study room, a young Roman named Gaius reads Demetrius's copy. He is not a philosopher but a curious administrator stationed in Egypt. He is struck by Aristotle's idea that the universe is orderly, that nature follows rules that can be understood. He makes notes in the margins, then commissions his own copy to send back to Rome. That copy travels by ship across the Mediterranean, surviving storms and pirates. It arrives in Ostia, is carried to a villa on the Palatine Hill, and stored in a private library. There, it is read by a Stoic tutor who teaches it to the children of senators. One of those children, years later, becomes an advisor to Emperor Hadrian, and brings the ideas of cosmic order into imperial policy, influencing how Rome maps its roads, builds its aqueducts, and understands its place in the world. Centuries pass, Rome falls. The Western Empire crumbles into silence, but in the East, in Constantinople, the flame of learning flickers on. A Byzantine monk copying ancient texts to preserve them from the darkening age finds a Latin version of On the Heavens in a forgotten chest. He translates it back into Greek, the language of its origin, and stores it in the imperial library. The ink is faded, the papyrus brittle, but the ideas remain clear. Then in the 9th century, a new center of light rises in the east, Baghdad. Under the Abbasid caliphs, the House of Wisdom becomes the new Alexandria, a place where scholars gather to translate, study, and expand human knowledge. A Nestorian Christian named Hunayn ibn Ishaq, fluent in Greek, Syriac, and Arabic, is tasked with translating all known works of Aristotle. He finds the Byzantine copy, compares it with others, and produces a flawless Arabic version. In his translation, he adds careful notes, clarifies confusing passages, and honors Aristotle not as a pagan relic, but as a fellow seeker of truth. From Baghdad, the text spreads across the Islamic world. It is studied in Cordoba, Cairo, and Samarkand. Scholars debate its ideas, test its claims, and build upon them. Al-Farabi writes commentaries. Avicenna weaves its logic into his medical and philosophical works. And in the 12th century, a young scholar in Toledo, then a crossroads of Muslim, Christian, and Jewish thought, begins translating Arabic texts back into Latin. His name is Gerard of Cremona. He does not speak Greek, but he trusts the Arabic versions, knowing they were made from the original. He works for decades, translating over 70 scientific texts. Among them is Aristotle, on the heavens. His Latin translation becomes the standard in European universities for the next 400 years. Now in Paris, in the 13th century, a Dominican friar named Thomas Aquinas reads Gerard's translation. He is trying to reconcile faith and reason, to show that God's creation follows divine logic. Aristotle's ideas become the backbone of his great work, the Summa Theologica. The quiet observations made in Alexandria now shape the theology of an entire continent. Time flows onward. In the 15th century, the printing press is invented. Suddenly, texts no longer need to be copied by hand. A Venetian printer produces the first printed edition of On the Heavens in 1495. Hundreds of copies are made. One finds its way to a young man in Pisa named Galileo. He reads it, questions it, tests it with his telescope, and begins the scientific revolution. The scroll that Demetrius copied in Alexandria has now changed form many times. Papyrus to parchment, Greek to Latin to Arabic and back again, manuscript to printed book. But its core remains, the human desire to understand the sky above us. And today, in your own time, you can read Aristotle's words online, in a library, or in a quiet room with a printed page. The journey that began in a sunlit hall by the sea has reached you, not through conquest, but through care. Not through force, but through faithful hands who believe that some things are worth saving. So as you listen to this story, know that you are part of that chain. Every time you read, reflect, or wonder at the stars, you honor those quiet scribes, those patient scholars, those midnight translators who kept the light alive. The Library of Alexandria may be gone, but its spirit endures. In every book that is read, every question that is asked, every mind that chooses curiosity over fear, hello once more and welcome. Sit down and relax. Take a deep breath. Let the weight of the day slip away like a scroll gently unrolling on a cedar table. We are still in Alexandria, not only in place but in spirit, following the quiet echoes of those who believe that knowledge is a gift meant to be shared, not hoarded. In our journey so far, we have walked the colonnaded halls of the Mausoleum, watched scholars trace the curve of the earth, and followed a single text across continents and centuries. Now, let us turn our attention to something even more fragile, more human, the voices that history almost forgot, especially the women whose wisdom helped shape the world, even when their names were left out of the records. Long before the library was built, Egypt honored women in ways rare for the ancient world. Queens ruled as pharaohs. Priestesses interpreted the will of the gods. And in Alexandria, under the Ptolemies, that tradition continued, though quietly, often behind the scenes. One such woman was Queen Berenice II, wife of Ptolemy III. She was not only a royal consort but a patron of the arts and sciences. When her husband went to war, she dedicated her long, braided hair to the gods for his safe return. When it vanished from the temple, perhaps stolen, perhaps taken by the wind, the court astronomer Canaan of Samos declared it had been placed among the stars. And so the constellation Coma Berenices, the hair of Berenice, was born. It still shines in the northern sky, a soft cluster of stars near Leo, visible on clear spring nights. Her offering became eternal, not through power but through poetry and astronomy, woven together in the library's sky. Later in the 1st century BCE, another woman walked the halls of learning, Didyma, a poet and scholar from Rhodes. Though few of her verses survive, ancient sources mention her as a respected editor of Sappho's poems, fragments of love, longing, and womanhood that might have been lost without her care. She worked alongside male scholars, comparing manuscripts, restoring damaged lines, ensuring that the voice of one of history's greatest lyric poets would not fade into silence. And then, centuries later, as the library's light dimmed, came Hypatia, a name that still carries both brilliance and sorrow. Born around 350 CE, she was the daughter of Theon, a mathematician and teacher at the Alexandrian Museum. From childhood, she studied geometry, astronomy, and philosophy. She learned to chart the paths of planets, to calculate eclipses, and to teach Plato and Aristotle with clarity and grace. Hypatia did not seek fame. She wore simple robes, avoided luxury, and devoted her life to teaching. Students came from across the Roman world to sit at her feet, not because she shouted, but because she listened. She believed that philosophy was not about winning arguments, but about calming the soul. In her lectures, she spoke of the harmony of the spheres, of how numbers reflect divine order, and of how reason could guide us through fear and chaos. For a time, even in a city torn by religious and political strife, Hypatia was respected by pagans, Christians, and Jews alike. Governors sought her counsel. Bishops exchanged letters with her. She represented a bridge between worlds, a living link to the library's old dream of unity through knowledge. But bridges are fragile. In 415 CE, tensions in Alexandria boiled over. A mob, inflamed by suspicion and fear, turned on her. They dragged her from her chariot, took her to a church, and killed her. Her death sent shockwaves through the intellectual world. Many scholars fled the city. The great tradition of open inquiry in Alexandria never fully recovered. Yet even in death, Hypatia's voice did not vanish. Her students carried her teachings to Athens, to Constantinople, and beyond. Centuries later, during the Renaissance, her story inspired thinkers who sought to revive the spirit of rational inquiry. Today, she is remembered not only as a martyr, but as a symbol of calm courage, the kind that speaks softly, thinks deeply, and refuses to let fear silence truth. And she was not alone. In hidden corners of history, other women preserved knowledge in their own ways. Nuns in monasteries copied medical texts. Mothers taught their daughters herbal remedies passed down through generations. Merchants, wives in Alexandria kept household accounts that reveal sophisticated math. Their names are rarely recorded, but their contributions are woven into the fabric of what we know. Now imagine a quiet room in a convent in 6th century Egypt. A young woman named Theodora copies a treatise on medicinal plants, some of which were first studied in the library's gardens. She does not sign her name to the scroll, but she adds a small note in the margin. "This herb eases fever. My mother used it when I was a child." That note, simple and personal, is a thread connecting ancient science to human care. Knowledge is not only in grand theories, it is also in the quiet acts of preservation. A mother's remedy, a scribe's careful hand, a teacher's patient voice. The Library of Alexandria was more than a building. It was a promise that every human mind, regardless of gender or origin, has something to offer. And that promise still lives. In every girl who opens a science book, in every student who asks why, in every person who chooses understanding over division, you hear the echo of those forgotten voices. Today, let us step into the scriptorium, the writing room, where silence is not empty but full, full of concentration, full of care, full of the slow, sacred work of copying the world's wisdom, one line at a time. The scriptorium is a long, narrow chamber with high windows that let in cool morning light but keep out the harsh midday sun. The walls are lined with shelves holding clay jars, each labeled with a number and title. On long wooden tables, scribes sit side by side, their backs straight, their eyes focused. There is no talking here, only the whisper of reed pens on papyrus, the occasional dip into an inkwell, the soft tap of a ruler aligning a margin. Each scribe begins the day with a ritual. They wash their hands in a basin of rose water, not for cleanliness alone, but as a gesture of respect. For to copy a text is not a mechanical task. It is an act of devotion. They believe that the words they write carry the soul of the author, and that to handle them carelessly is to dishonor both the past and the future. The ink they use is made in a small room nearby. Soot from olive oil lamps is mixed with water and gum arabic, then aged in sealed jars. The best ink is deep black, smooth, and long-lasting. Red ink, made from cinnabar or red ochre, is reserved for titles, corrections, or divine names. Every ingredient is measured with care. Even the glue that binds scrolls is prepared slowly over low heat so it will not crack with time. Papyrus comes from the Nile Delta, harvested in summer when the reeds are tall and strong. The outer green layer is peeled away, and the inner pith is sliced into thin strips. These are laid side by side, overlapped, then pressed and dried under weight. The result is a smooth writing surface, slightly textured, faintly golden, with the sweet, earthy smell of river plants. A single scroll might be 10, 20, or even 30 feet long. To copy a full work like Herodotus's histories could take weeks. Scribes work in shifts, their eyes resting often, their hands massaged with olive oil to prevent cramping. Mistakes are rare, but when they happen, they are not scratched out. Instead, a small dot is placed beneath the error, and the correct word is written above. This system, called dipple, ensures that no original word is ever truly erased. Even errors are preserved, as part of the text's journey. Among the scribes is an older man named Leon. He has worked in the library for 40 years. His eyes are tired, but his hand is steady. He specializes in philosophical texts, Plato, Aristotle, the Stoics. He does not just copy words, he reads them, ponders them, sometimes weeps at their beauty. Once, when asked why he stays so long in this quiet room, he replied, "I am not writing for today. I am writing for someone I will never meet, who will read these words and feel less alone." Near him sits a young apprentice, Callias, barely 16. He is learning to form letters with grace. His first attempts were shaky, uneven, but Leon corrects him gently, showing him how to hold the reed at just the right angle, how to let the breath guide the hand. Writing, Leon says, is breathing made visible. At midday, the scribes pause. They step into a courtyard shaded by date palms. There they eat flatbread, olives, and lentils. They do not speak of their work, there is no boasting here. Instead, they watch the doves circle above the rooftops, listen to the distant cry of a fisherman, feel the warmth of the stone beneath their sandals. Rest is part of the craft. In the afternoon, some scribes turn to translation. For the library does not only preserve Greek texts, it seeks knowledge from every land. A Persian astronomer's star charts arrive on parchment. A Hebrew medical manual comes from Jerusalem. A Sanskrit fragment on mathematics is brought by a merchant from the Indus Valley. These must be rendered into Greek so all scholars can understand them. Translation is not mere word-for-word substitution. It is an art of listening, of hearing the thought behind the language and finding its true echo in another tongue. A good translator, it is said, is a bridge with no weight, so light that the traveler does not feel they have crossed anything at all. Sometimes a scribe discovers something new while copying, a variant reading, a missing line restored from another source, a marginal note that clarifies a confusing passage. These discoveries are brought to the head librarian, who may call a small gathering to discuss them. There is no fanfare, only quiet excitement, like the first bloom of a night flower. As evening falls, the scrolls are carefully rolled, tied with linen thread, and returned to their cases. The tables are wiped clean. The inkwells are stoppered. The lamps are extinguished one by one. And yet the work never truly ends. For every scroll copied is a seed planted in time. It may lie dormant for centuries, buried in a ruin, hidden in a monastery wall, tucked inside a merchant's chest, until someone somewhere unrolls it and reads, "All men by nature desire to know." That sentence, written by Aristotle, copied by Demetrius, translated by Hunain, printed by a Venetian, read by a student in a modern library. It has traveled farther than any army, outlasted more kings, and touched more minds than its author could have dreamed. And it began here in this quiet room with a breath, a pen, and a promise to remember. Imagine a merchant vessel from Rhodes docking under moonlight. Its captain, a man named Lycomedes, has made this journey many times. He knows the library's agents wait on the quay not with coins but with lists. They ask not for spices or silk, but for books. Do you carry any new texts? They inquire, their voices low. Any rare editions? Any works from the East? Lycomedes nods. From a sealed chest in his cabin, he produces a bundle wrapped in old linen. Inside are 3 scrolls, a commentary on Euclid's geometry from a school in Cyrene, a collection of Babylonian eclipse records translated into Greek, and a newly copied play by Menander, thought lost after a fire in Athens. The agents examine them with reverence, not greed. They offer fair payment, but more often they offer something better, a copy of a text the captain's home city does not yet have. Exchange, not extraction, is the library's way. This is how knowledge grows, not by taking but by sharing. The scrolls are carried through the sleeping city in padded baskets, guarded not by soldiers but by scholars. They pass through the canopic gate, past the temple of Serapis, and into the royal quarter. There, in a receiving room lit by a single oil lamp, the head librarian inspects each one. He unrolls them slowly, checks for damage, reads a few lines aloud to test the script. If a scroll is fragile, it is taken immediately to the conservation chamber, a cool, dry room where papyrus is mended with fine linen strips and fish glue, and brittle edges are reinforced with thin layers of fresh papyrus. One of tonight's scrolls, the Babylonian eclipse records, will soon be placed in the hands of an astronomer named Apollonius. He has spent years trying to predict lunar cycles with greater accuracy. When he reads the Babylonian data, meticulous observations spanning centuries, he sees patterns no Greek had noticed. He combines them with his own calculations and produces a new table so precise it will be used for over 500 years. But none of this happens quickly. There is no rush, no deadline, no pressure to publish. The library operates on the time of the stars, not the market. A scholar may spend a decade on a single commentary. A scribe may spend a year perfecting one copy, and that is honored, not seen as wasted time, but as devotion. Now let us leave the harbor and walk inland to the library's botanical garden. Hidden behind high walls shaded by fig and pomegranate trees, this is where Theophrastus once walked, and where his students still tend his legacy. Rows of plants are labeled with small clay tags. Nard from India, used for calming the mind. Myrrh from Arabia cleans wounds. Poppy from Thrace eases pain but clouds thought. Here, medicine is not separate from philosophy. To heal the body is to understand nature's balance. A young herbalist named Irene grinds dried leaves into powder, mixes them with honey, and prepares remedies for the city's poor, free of charge. She learned her craft from scrolls in the medical wing of the library, but also from her grandmother, who knew the plants of the Nile Delta by heart. In this garden, ancient Egyptian wisdom and Greek science grow side by side, like 2 vines twinning around the same trellis. As night deepens, the garden grows still. Crickets sing. A nightingale calls from the cypress trees. Irene covers her jars, washes her hands in a stone basin, and walks back toward the scholars' quarters. She passes a young man sitting on a bench, gazing at the stars. It is Claudius, a student of Eratosthenes. He is sketching constellations in a wax tablet, whispering their names: Orion, Cassiopeia, Ursa Major. "Do you think they see us too?" he asks softly, not looking up. Irene smiles. "If they are wise," she replies, "they must." And in that moment, science and poetry meet, not as opposites but as companions on the same quiet path. This is the true spirit of Alexandria, not the accumulation of facts, but the weaving of understanding across disciplines, cultures, and generations. Astronomy and botany, geometry and poetry, medicine and ethics, all are threads in the same great tapestry. And though the library's buildings may one day fall, this spirit cannot be destroyed. It lives in every garden where healing plants are grown, in every harbor where ideas arrive on ships, in every quiet student who looks up at the stars and wonders. So as you rest here with us, under the same moon that once shone on Eratosthenes and Hypatia, know that you are part of this living tradition. Your curiosity is a lamp. Your care is a scroll. Your calm attention is a gift to the future. Hello again and welcome. Sit down and relax. Take a deep breath. Let your thoughts settle like fine dust on an undisturbed scroll, resting in the quiet corners of a room where time moves slowly and every breath feels like a page turning in a book written long ago. Beneath the warm Mediterranean sky, in a small chamber near the eastern wing of the library, a scholar named Philon lies on a simple cot, his hands folded over his chest. The oil lamp beside him has burned low, its flame flickering like a distant star. Outside, the city sleeps. Inside, his mind drifts, not into dreams of conquest or glory, but into the soft landscapes of memory and imagination. In his sleep, he walks again through the halls of the Mausian, but they are not made of stone. They are woven from light and sound, the rustle of papyrus, the murmur of distant voices reciting poetry, the scent of cedar and ink rising like incense. He passes shelves that stretch into infinity, each scroll glowing faintly, as if holding a secret warmth. He reaches for one, and it opens not with his hands but with his thoughts. The text inside is not in Greek, nor in any language he knows. Yet he understands it perfectly. It speaks of rivers that flow upward, of stars that sing in harmony, of a world where knowledge is not owned but shared like breath. In this dream library, there are no borders, no lost works, no fires. Every voice that ever spoke is preserved, not in perfect copies but in living echoes that respond when someone truly listens. He wakes gently, as if surfacing from deep water. The room is still dark, but the first hint of dawn touches the eastern window. He does not rise immediately. Instead, he lies still, holding the feeling of the dream close, like a seed wrapped in cloth, waiting for the right soil. Later that morning, he will go to the conservation room where a fragment of papyrus, no larger than his palm, has just arrived from the desert. It was found buried in the ruins of an old villa near Oxyrhynchus, wrapped in linen, hidden beneath a floor tile. The ink is faded, the edges crumbling, but 3 lines remain legible. They are from a lost poem by Sappho, speaking of moonlight on water and the ache of absence. Philon will spend weeks stabilizing the fragment, photographing it under different lights, comparing it to other fragments held in distant collections. He will not publish for fame. He will do it so that someone, someday, might read those lines and feel less alone in their longing. Centuries later, in the late 19th century, British archaeologists dig in the same desert sands near Oxyrhynchus. The city has long been abandoned, its temples turned to dust, its harbor filled with silt. But beneath the rubble they find something unexpected. Not gold or statues, but trash heaps, mountains of discarded papyri, thrown away by ordinary people 2,000 years ago. Bills, letters, grocery lists, school exercises. And among them, fragments of lost plays by Sophocles, poems by Sappho, and even early Christian texts. These scraps, once considered worthless, become priceless. Scholars from Oxford and Berlin painstakingly piece them together like a vast, broken mosaic. A line from a comedy here, a verse from a hymn there, slowly, voices long silenced begin to speak again. And among those voices is one that copied a medical recipe in shaky handwriting, or a student practicing his letters with the note, "Mother says I must write neatly." These are not the great names of history, but they are real, human, present. And in that act of rediscovery, the dream of the library lives on, not in marble halls, but in patient hands sifting through sand, in quiet rooms where scholars lean over microscopes, in digital archives where anyone with an internet connection can read a fragment of a poem written before Christ. The library was never just a place. It was a promise that nothing worth knowing should be lost, that every voice matters, that even the smallest fragment preserved with care might one day bring comfort, insight, or beauty to a stranger across time. Long after the last lamp in Alexandria's library was extinguished, its spirit did not vanish. It traveled, not in ships or scrolls alone, but in the quiet resolve of those who refused to let knowledge die. In the centuries that followed, as empires rose and fell like tides, small sanctuaries of learning kept the flame alive. And none were more unexpected, perhaps, than the monasteries of the Egyptian desert. Far from the city, beyond the fertile Nile Valley, in places where the wind sculpts dunes and silence is as vast as the sky, Christian monks built simple cells of mud, brick, and stone. They came seeking solitude, prayer, and purity of heart. But many also brought books. Some had studied in Alexandria before its decline. Others inherited scrolls passed down through teachers who remembered the old ways. In these desert monasteries, the rhythm of life was slow and sacred. Each day began before dawn with chanting. Then came work, grinding grain, weaving baskets, tending gardens, and in the quiet hours between, reading and copying, not for fame, not for debate, but as an act of devotion. To copy scripture was to touch the divine, but many monks also copied secular texts, Homer, Plato, Galen, believing that truth, wherever it was found, came from God. One such monk was named Pambo. He lived in the 4th century in a community near Nitria. He could not read when he first arrived, but he asked an older brother to teach him. For years, he copied only one sentence: "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom." He wrote it over and over, not to memorize it, but to let it sink into his bones. Only when his hand moved without thought did he begin copying longer texts. Among the scrolls he preserved was a medical treatise from the Library of Alexandria, on the pulse, the humors, the balance of the body. He did not understand all of it, but he copied it faithfully, believing that healing was also holy. Centuries later, when Arab physicians came to Egypt seeking ancient knowledge, they found his copies in a hidden niche behind an altar. They translated them into Arabic, and from there, the knowledge flowed into the hospitals of Baghdad and Cordoba. In this way, the library lived, not in one place but in many, not in one language but in all that carried truth forward. The desert monks did not call themselves librarians, yet they were. They built libraries not of marble but of memory, not of grand halls but of humble hearts that said, "This is worth saving." And the same spirit crossed the sea to Europe. In Ireland, on windswept cliffs, monks in places like Clonmacnoise and Iona copied not only the Gospels, but fragments of Virgil and Cicero, texts that had vanished from the continent. They illuminated letters with gold and lapis lazuli, turning each page into a prayer. Their scriptoriums were cold, their ink froze in winter, yet they wrote on, preserving what others had forgotten. In Italy, Cassiodorus, a Roman statesman turned monk, founded a monastery at Vivarium in the 6th century with a clear mission: to save the literature of antiquity. He instructed his brothers to copy both sacred and secular works, saying, "The divine and human sciences are not enemies, but companions on the road to truth." His library became a bridge between the ancient and medieval worlds. Centuries later, in the Renaissance, scholars like Petrarch and Poggio Bracciolini scoured monastic libraries across Europe, searching for lost classics. In a dusty abbey in Switzerland, Poggio found a complete copy of Lucretius, On the Nature of Things, a poem that would help ignite the scientific revolution. It had survived because a 9th-century monk, though he disagreed with its philosophy, copied it anyway, writing in the margin, "Pagan but beautifully written." That single act of respect, of copying what one does not agree with, simply because it is wise or beautiful, is the true legacy of Alexandria. It is the belief that knowledge belongs to everyone, that no voice should be silenced by time or dogma, and that the quiet work of preservation is as noble as any conquest. And now, in your own time, that work continues. In digital archives, in public libraries, in classrooms where a teacher reads a poem aloud, in homes where a parent shows a child how to look at the stars and wonder. The Library of Alexandria was never truly lost. It was scattered, like seeds on the wind, and took root wherever someone chose to care. So as you sit here, listening in the quiet, know that you are part of this unbroken line. Your attention is an act of preservation. Your curiosity is a lamp in the dark, and your calm presence right now honors all those who kept the light alive. The dream of Alexandria did not end in monasteries or desert cells. It waited quietly through centuries of change until the world was ready to hear it again. And when it returned, it came not with trumpets, but with books placed on open shelves, available not only to kings, scholars, or monks, but to anyone who could read. In the 18th century, a new idea began to take root in Europe and America, that knowledge should not be locked away, but shared freely among all people. This was not merely a practical notion, it was a moral one. Thinkers like Benjamin Franklin believed that an informed citizenry was the foundation of a free society. So in 1731, in Philadelphia, he and a group of friends formed the Library Company, not a private collection, but a subscription library where members pooled their resources to buy books everyone could borrow. It was a modest beginning. The shelves held only a few dozen volumes at first on science, history, navigation, and philosophy. But the principle was revolutionary: knowledge as a common good, no longer the privilege of the few, but the right of the many. Across the ocean, in England, similar movements grew. The British Museum opened its doors in 1759, and with it, a public reading room where anyone, tailor, sailor, or schoolteacher, could request a book and read it under the same roof as kings and diplomats. The air smelled of paper, polish, and possibility. Here, a young Charles Darwin pored over geological surveys that would shape his theory of evolution. Here, Karl Marx spent years researching in the quiet corners, his notes filling countless notebooks. These spaces were not grand like the Mausean, but they carried the same spirit. They were places where curiosity was honored, where questions were welcome, and where silence was not emptiness, but respect for the work of the mind. Then, in the 19th century, a man named Andrew Carnegie took the idea even further. Born in Scotland to a poor weaver's family, he had known hunger and hardship. But he also knew the power of a borrowed book. As a boy, he was allowed to read from a small library opened by a local benefactor. That access changed his life. Years later, after amassing great wealth in steel, he gave it back, not in palaces or statues, but in libraries. Over 2,500 of them across the United States, Canada, Britain, and beyond. Each one built with local stone, each one with large windows for natural light, each one open to all, rich or poor, man or woman, child or elder. He called them palaces for the people. And in many towns, they were the first buildings dedicated not to worship, commerce, or government, but to learning for its own sake. Inside, children discovered worlds beyond their villages. Immigrants learned new languages. Workers studied engineering at night. And in every reading room, the same quiet reverence reigned, the same hush that once filled the halls of Alexandria. Even the design echoed the past: long tables for study, high ceilings for air and light, shelves arranged not to impress but to invite, and always, always the sense that you belonged there simply because you wished to know. In the 20th century, this dream expanded again. Public libraries began offering not just books, but records, films, lectures, and eventually computers. They became community centers, safe havens, places of refuge and renewal. During the Great Depression, they offered warmth and hope. During wars, they preserved culture when cities burned. And in our own time, they offer internet access, job training, story hours for children, and quiet corners for those with nowhere else to go. All of this flows from the same source: the belief that knowledge should be gathered, protected, and shared. Not owned, not controlled, but offered freely like water from a well. And now, in the digital age, the dream has taken yet another form. The internet at its best is a global library, vast, imperfect, sometimes chaotic but astonishingly open. A student in Nairobi can read Aristotle. A grandmother in Oslo can explore ancient Egyptian medicine. A child in rural India can watch a lecture on the stars. The texts that once traveled by ship, by camel, by monk's hand, now travel at the speed of light, carried not on papyrus, but on waves of data. Of course, this new library has its challenges. Misinformation spreads as easily as truth. Algorithms can trap us in echo chambers, and not everyone has equal access. Yet the ideal remains: a world where no question is too small, no seeker turned away, and every voice has a chance to be heard. That ideal was born in Alexandria. It survived in desert monasteries, in Irish scriptoria, in Renaissance rediscoveries, in Carnegie's stone halls, and now in the quiet glow of a screen at midnight. It endures because it answers a deep human need, not just to know but to connect, to belong to something larger than ourselves. On a quiet stretch of Egypt's northern coast, near the site where the ancient library once stood, a new building rises from the shore. Its walls curve like a half-opened book, its roof angled to catch the sun like a sundial. This is the Bibliotheca Alexandrina, opened in 2002, not as a replica, but as a tribute. It holds over 8 million books in dozens of languages. Its reading rooms are filled with students from every continent. Its planetarium echoes with the same wonder that once filled Eratosthenes' courtyard. And beneath its floors, conservation labs work to restore papyri, manuscripts, and digital files alike, because the work of preservation never ends. But the true library was never just stone or scroll. It lives wherever someone chooses curiosity over fear, patience over haste, and sharing over hoarding. It lives in the mother who reads to her child at bedtime, in the student who stays up late solving an equation, in the librarian who helps a stranger find the right book at the right time, in you, listening now, letting history wash over you like a calm tide. So as we come to the end of our journey, know this: you carry the library within you. Every question you ask, every truth you honor, every moment you choose to learn, you rebuild it, one quiet act at a time. If you enjoyed this calm journey through history, please consider subscribing to the channel for more long-form, relaxing narrations. Tap the bell so you never miss a story. And if this video brought you a moment of peace, share it with someone who might need it too. Your support helps keep these quiet histories alive. Sleep well.